Leader Schumer, this talk about election security has revived discussions of the SAVE Act, which you have said you oppose. Proponents of it say that it's, to have ID, you have to prove U.S. citizenship to be able to vote. Though some of the claims they make, to be clear, are overstated. We know there's not widespread election fraud. But polling does suggest, there's a new Pew Research poll, that 95% of Republicans, but also 71% of Democrats like this idea. So why do you not?
All right, everyone, let's get started. Because Chuck Schumer's Democratic Party is clearly feeling the pressure. Republicans believe they're gaining ground, and Democrats seem worried about losing future elections. So now, Schumer is making the rounds with legacy media, aiming to alarm black voters. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. He's claiming that voter ID laws are racist and even sexist. Here's the problem with that message. For most Americans, voter ID just sounds reasonable. Across races and backgrounds, support for it is strong. Polls consistently show that a large majority, including Democrats and black voters, favor voter ID. So why is Schumer pushing this argument? Because election security has never fit comfortably with the Democratic strategy. Before we go further, hit the like button if you find this discussion worthwhile and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.
It's Jim Crow 2.0. And I called it Jim Crow 2.0, and the right wing went nuts all over the internet. That's because they know it's true. What they're trying to do here is the same thing that was done in the South for decades to prevent people of color from voting. For instance, if you change, you're a woman who got married and changed your last name, you won't be able to show ID and you'll be discriminated against. If you can't find a birth certificate or a proper ID, you'll be discriminated against. This is vicious and nasty. And I said to our Republican colleagues, it will not pass the Senate. You will not get a single Democratic vote in the Senate. We're not reviving Jim Crow all over the...
Schumer's explanation is hard to take seriously. He argues that despite all the modern technology we use every day, background checks, digital records, verification systems, a woman who changes her last name after marriage might somehow be blocked from voting in 2026. Pause and think about that. In a world where identity can be confirmed to buy a home, get a passport, travel, or open a bank account, we're supposed to believe voting is the one thing that suddenly becomes impossible. Then comes the familiar claim that voter ID unfairly targets black voters. The suggestion is that African Americans either can't obtain identification or don't know how. That's the story being told. What makes this even more awkward is that old footage from 2012 has resurfaced, showing Barack Obama supporting voter identification. Let that sink in. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at what's really being said and what the facts actually show.
Oh, you're right. There you go.
That's it right there. The voice you hear belongs to a poll worker helping with the voting process. She clearly says, you need an ID. You can then hear Obama respond, you're right, before pulling it out. Notice what didn't happen. There was no panic, no talk of Jim Crow 2.0, no fear that showing identification was somehow oppressive. He simply confirmed who he was and moved on. Chuck Schumer, however, wants people to believe this basic step is dangerous.
What I did to start off my show today is that I brought up Senator Chuck Schumer because Chuck Schumer called what Trump's trying to do with the elections. He called it Jim Crow 2.0. And what I guarded against, I said, I've taken heat from the Democratic Party from time to time. You certainly have, on numerous occasions. And I said, don't get Trumpish. Don't engage in that kind of hyperbole, because we're living in the year 2026. And when you start bringing up Jim Crow 2.0, you're trying to harken back to a time that most people recognize. No, we're not living in those times right now. Of course, we've got our troubles, but we're not doing. Don't do that, because that's playing right into Trump's hands. Was I right in saying that?
Here's another example. There's footage of Joe Biden showing identification to vote during a recent midterm election. Again, no outrage, no claims of discrimination, just routine verification. It's remarkable how this only becomes a crisis when it's politically useful.
Her first vote.
From Natalie Biden now voting.
That's where the hypocrisy stands out. Many of the same figures who once supported voter ID and election safeguards suddenly oppose them when the political winds shift. What was once normal practice is now framed as a threat. Next, let's move to a conversation between Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith, where they discuss Schumer's Jim Crow 2.0 comments and the attempt to scare black voters. Pay close attention because this exchange says a lot about how exaggerated this narrative has become.
Yes, and you're factually right. It's this thing that he's trying to do with not conceding elections. It's not primarily a racial issue. Not everything is primarily a racial issue. It has racial overtones, as does everything in this country. But yes, you're right. It's foolish to make it about that. And it's also foolish because Biden used that exact phrase about voting in Georgia. And then they did polling after that next election came up. And even the black folks said, we had no problem voting. So, you know, like you say, don't engage in the kind of hyperbole that's just going to bite you in the ass.
At the core of this, you're right about the facts. The issue isn't race. It's about refusing to accept election outcomes. Not everything comes back to racial motives, even though race is often pulled into nearly every national debate. Turning it into that kind of argument is a mistake. We've seen how that approach backfires. Joe Biden himself used the same dramatic language when talking about Georgia's voting laws. Then the election happened, and even black voters said they had no trouble voting. That should have ended the discussion. Exaggeration only weakens the case, and Stephen A. Smith deserves credit for calling that out. Still, he's late to the realization this isn't Democrats suddenly acting like Trump. This is how the party has operated for a long time. When they start losing on facts, they reach for whatever tool they think might work. Emotional pressure, fear, and racial tension. We've watched this playbook before. It used to work better than it does now, but they keep trying. The real question is whether Chuck Schumer will admit this tactic isn't landing or whether he'll keep pushing it anyway. Now, here's the bigger point. If Republicans control Congress but still fail to secure something as widely supported as voter ID, then they don't deserve that power. That would mean they let Schumer scare them away from a policy backed by Americans across party lines. That's unacceptable.
Should non-citizens be voting in American elections? The answer is no. And the Democrats have taken a hard position that it's okay. Now, the law already prevents that, but if that's true, then why wouldn't we want to put into law something that would require when you go to vote that you prove you're a United States citizen? And that's all the SAVE Act does. And so, you know, they can cry and lament this actually being voted on, but I'd be hard-pressed to have to defend a position that doesn't believe that you have to be an American citizen to vote in an American election.
I'll finish off with the words of Speaker Mike Johnson defending the SAVE Act. This is from yesterday. Leader through and listen.
The SAVE Act just simply says you have to have verification of citizenship to register to vote. That's about a 90-10 issue on many of the polls in this country. And we're going to enhance it by what the president calls the Save America Act. And so it would be proof of citizenship to register to vote and voter ID, which is also about an 80 or 90% issue on the polling nationwide.
Next, let's shift to another example of political inconsistency. Senate leadership has weighed in, but I want you to hear what's happening at the local level. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey often speaks as if he has more authority than he actually does, and his statements don't always match reality. Despite his objections, Minnesota continues to cooperate with federal authorities, and ICE still has access to jails. That's the fact. Watch this next clip where CNN questions Mayor Frey about why he cooperated with ICE during the Obama years, but resists doing so. Now, listen closely. It says a lot about how political positions change depending on who's in power.
It is worth noting that during the Obama years, the Hennepin County Jail actually had a policy where they let an ICE agent keep an office there and allowed them to talk to immigrants. So the policy has clearly been, under a Democratic president, what now the Trump administration is asking for. I mean, big picture, do you think it's good policy for the jails to follow an ICE detainer and hand someone over if they've committed a crime? And again, this only happens after they've served their time, for whatever crime they may have committed against the people of Minnesota.
I mean, look, you're asking all the right questions here. And while I don't have full expertise in how the operations at the jail are conducted. Again, that's not our jurisdiction. What I would say is that there are mechanisms to do this lawfully.
Exactly. Let's not make this more complicated than it is. The process here is straightforward. Coordination with ICE ensures that criminals in federal custody don't just walk back into society. You don't need a degree in criminal justice to understand it. The point is simple. If someone is detained, local authorities notify ICE and federal officials take custody. That's all there is to it. Acting confused or pretending it's complicated makes it seem like you're ignoring the basics. And please, don't try to lecture me on being a mayor when the procedure is this simple.
Would you advise someone, even if they're very angry, even if they don't like the laws, to insert themselves into the middle of an active law enforcement situation?
If they see something wrong, absolutely.
You would advise a person or a client of yours to literally engage in the middle of an active law enforcement matter?
If they see something wrong, I would say yes. I would say definitely
That's a crime.
I would say put your.
You're advising people to commit crime?
I'm advising.
Do you consider filming with your phone?
Just to be extremely clear, because I know how these things get clipped and shipped around on Twitter.
Now, let's shift to another example that shows the Democratic Party's stance on law and order. Scott Jennings was visibly stunned when Barry Sears openly admitted advising someone to obstruct law enforcement or participate in criminal activity. Think about that. Would you really offer that kind of guidance to anyone? You don't need a law degree or special expertise to know common sense here. Watching law enforcement officers, federal, state, or local, do their jobs makes it clear. You don't insert yourself into the middle of it. You can observe, record, or criticize from a distance if you think something is unfair, but you shouldn't act in ways that directly interfere. Yet there will always be people who follow bad advice, believing it's clever to impede law enforcement.
What I'm actually telling you, Scott, is if my client came to me and said, Bakari, I was outside and I saw something going down and I saw somebody being abused and I went and tried to put myself in between them, or I raised the camera, do not hit officers. Do not spit on officers. But yes, by all means, if you see something wrong, videotape it. I mean, I can't sit here. My dad was a member of SNCC, right? He was a professional disruptor.
Holding a camera is different than inserting yourself or inserting your vehicle in the middle of a law.
I mean, I think, but
Meanwhile, the person giving that advice will happily promote it on television, but never act on it themselves. They know the consequences would be severe. That's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to stay updated on new content. We'll be back soon with more. Until next time.